Welcome to the Enlighten Up podcast, where I am going to take you into a deep exploration of what it means to exist in this current reality. We are going to raise your vibes, open your mind, expand your heart, and dive deep into the wondrous mysteries and possibilities of this lifetime. There's been a spiritual catalyst that has set in motion the awakening process of many across the globe to return to the knowingness of self and unite what has been separated. Together, we're going to bring light into that darkness. We're going to remember the joy of living. But most of all, we're going to turn up the volume of our own eternal power and do the thing we're here to do. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Enlighten Up podcast. Today, I have a returning guest who I had on the show just a little over a year ago, and I'm happy to bring him back for a variety of different reasons. Today, I have Forrest Sealey, who is the Treasurer and Executive Director of Veterans for Child Rescue, which is focused on nailing the bad guys who are desperately hurting our children. And as you can see, for those of you who are watching either on Spotify or YouTube, Forrest is wearing a shirt that explains exactly what his mission is, ending child trafficking. Forrest, welcome back to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on your show.
Yeah, my audience knows that this is the one cause that I will never will never get bored of actually trying to bring awareness to do whatever I can to help in any way, shape, or form, as I believe that this particular mission is so important because I believe all paths of evil, shall we say, lead to here. So whatever kind of power struggles, money issues, anything, we can talk about a lot of different things. They all seem to be rooted somehow in this problem. So, last time I had you on the show, it was 2024,
Yes.
January, and we were in a different climate than we are right now. Can you first just let us know what is the current temperature of this child trafficking problem that, globally we face, but as we sit here in America, know that we are the largest consumers of child trafficking. What is the current climate right now versus where we were a year ago?
I think the climate is, if I was going to sum it up like a stock, it's very volatile. And what does that mean? Well, in 2017, we set out to work on a documentary called Contraland, which we've released in 2020. And we thought once we released it, everybody was going to watch it, and then we were all going to be singing Kumbaya, and it was going to stop. I think we really believe that. And what we've learned is that it's so entrenched in the world culture United States being the largest consumer, which is very shameful in my mind. And so, Craig Sawyer, our founder, and myself, we actually grew up together, and we grew up in what I believe a utopian society. Little small town north of Houston. We ran the streets during the summer from sunup to sundown. None of this existed in our world. And so when we found out that this was happening, that's why we're doing what we're doing. But if you look in the last couple of years, ever since like The Sound of Freedom, when it came out, it got people talking about it, because I would tell people what I do this is a living for me. This is my mission. And they would look at me and they would thank me for what I was doing, but they didn't want to talk about it. It was too hard for them to talk about. And it's a tough subject to talk about. And what I find is that I find a lot of men and women who reveal to me their personal, they've been sexually assaulted, or they've got a story that they, under other circumstances, I would never hear. And so what I've learned is it's much more prevalent. that this activity is much more prevalent. But now people are willing to talk about their stories, and they're not afraid, they're not ashamed. They realize it's not their fault, and they're wanting to fight back. You know, the first step for some people is just telling their story to fight back, and they want to engage somehow. So I think in the last year, it's become better to talk about this, and people are more open to listen and try to figure out what they can do. They're willing to do something. They don't know what that is. What can I do? Everybody wants to do something now, but they don't know what that is. So, you know, I try to give people advice on what they can do, but I am grateful for the climate right now. To me, there's a great opportunity to really start playing offense, because I
Mm.
felt like for the last, since 2017, we've been playing defense. And so now we can play some offense. And offense is good, because offense is what will bring victory to ending this.
Yeah, it's interesting. So what do you attribute to people being more open to listening now? Like what do you feel are some of the reasons behind that?
Well, and I'm going to get kind of sciency. And I've been studying. Of course, I've had several doctors. I just had a psychiatrist last week on our show, and she's affirmed some of the things that I've seen. We've become so dopamine demanding on our brains. Everything is about instant gratification. It used to be when I was growing up. I'm an ex-gener. You had to read a book, and it took you weeks to read a book. And so your brain is doing a lot of work. Okay. You're building the story. You can smell the sound, the lighting, everything is being formulated. And you have to have patience to get to the end of the story to know what happens. And so fast forward to today. I mean, after the books, we grew up watching movies, and then it was sitcoms, and now people are reading memes. If it's not a meme, or if it's not a 30-second, 45-second TikTok video, they want to go through it. So when you become demanding on the back part of your brain, the emotional part of your brain, you don't want to do logical thinking. And this topic is something, it's heavy. So you've got to really think about it. And here's the thing, Nicole, that really I tell people now, it's unnatural. And for us to have a conversation and put some brain power to an unnatural act, it's unnatural for an adult to look at a child in that manner and to desire them in that manner. It's very unnatural. So people, some people deal with it by saying, okay, I'm going to do something that makes me not think about it. It's a distraction. So now I think that people are understanding. They're backing off on their phones a little bit. They're backing off on some of the things that they're doing, and they're kind of meditating or taking some alone time or some walking through the woods, taking walks. And their brain is saying, okay, we got to think about this stuff. So to me, there's physiological changes that have allowed this to happen in our society. And it may sound woo-woo, but I don't really think it is. It kind of goes back to what puts you in a physiological place where you want to do something unnatural. And I think it's all about the demand of gratification.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So are you saying, like, when you say that, are you talking about the people who are like, is that driving more of the desire for children when it's unnatural, like by having that instant gratification? Is that what you're saying?
Well, sure. I mean, if you start looking at what your content is, and if you're consuming sexual based content, eventually it's like being on drugs. If you do a specific type of drug, your brain gets used to it, so you want more. If you're drinking alcohol, then eventually you may go to excess. And so the brain is not as complicated, I believe, as some try to make it out. We're very simple creatures. And you go back to 100 years ago, and you were a farmer, and let's say the male role. I'm saying I'm the patriarch of the family, and when I'm out in the fields working and hoeing the fields and herding cows or whatever it is I'm doing, I'm also able to think about, maybe I've got to think about how to deal with my kids, or to improve the relationship with my wife, or whatever. That to me is how life was 100 years ago
Mhm.
and beyond.
Mhm.
Okay. You didn't have all these distractions. So distractions have equated to pleasure. Everything that we seek now is what makes me happy. What's funny, I mean, you look at the biggest debate I have with my wife, who I've been married 32 years, coming up on 33 years, is what are we going to eat for dinner? You know, if we go out to eat, who you pick? No, you pick. It's comical, right? Because we make emotional decisions on our food. When food is fuel, instead of saying, look, what should I be eating during this season, or what's healthy, or what should I be putting into this vessel? We've turned everything into an emotional decision. And so, with that, when you become this dopamine, we're all dopamine addicts. I mean, it's very difficult not to be. But if you look at people that haven't been, you know, there are people that have been studied. You take a Tibetan monk who doesn't have all this. They can meditate and they can control their body. They can sit in the snow and meditate and never get cold
Hmm.
because they're using more horsepower in their brain to control their body. So I truly think that becoming an instant gratification culture, um, it's really killing us. And a great example is if you've been to the airport and you've seen somebody who's pitching a fit because they got bumped off a plane or they didn't get their first class seat. We see videos all the time, or somebody's in Starbucks and they got their order wrong. They're throwing these temper tantrums over a $5 or $10 meal. And eventually the police show up and they say, you know, ma'am or sir, I'm going to arrest you if you don't leave. And they'll say it 10 or 15 times. And I'm looking at him going, hey, the first time the cops show up, I'm getting out of there because that's logical to me. So what is the opposite of, or what is the enemy of logic? And that is over gratification. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't give you any time to really process, is this good for me? Is this not? Is this right? Is this wrong? Um, what's actually driving this? Actually taking the time to really process what's going on.
You know, there's a technique that psychologists will tell you if somebody says something to you that makes you really angry, that just amps you up to a 10, if you count to 10, you're engaging the frontal part of your brain where your logic chip and taking a deep breath. And it sounds silly. And whenever you have people that are trauma survivors, they tell them similar type exercises. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to disengage that back part of your brain, re-engage the front part of your brain. Because if you've been through trauma and you're in a safe place today and you're having some sort of an episode, if what they're trying to get you to do is to say, hey, you're not being harmed now. You may be thinking about it, you may be, reliving it, but look at where you're at. You're in a safe place. And the way to do that is to get that front part of your brain. Now, I'm not an expert on that. I'm kind of repeating some things that some psychiatrists and psychologists have shared with me in therapy, people that deal with trauma.
Yeah. So basically, the back of the brain is the reptilian brain. It's the survivor. It's like the fight or flight. It's just all based off of just, I need to survive. Right. Like, and so everything is just instinctual, not really thinking, not really trying to look forward to the future. It's just, I gotta like get out of now. Like, I gotta take care of now, and that's it. Whereas the front of the brain is actually processing and thinking about the future, thinking about consequences, thinking about, what would happen if.
For sure, for
Yeah.
sure. And so that leads us down to, if you look at consumption, whatever it is you consume, let's just say that you like chocolate,
Hmm.
and there are people that they have to have chocolate. They can't eat a half a candy bar. They're going to eat the whole box of candy bars, or they eat the whole thing of ice cream. The same thing goes to our our physical relationships. If you're consuming, if you don't have balance in your life, and you're consuming more than you should be consuming for whatever reason, there's a million different scenarios. I mean, you may be married, you may be divorced, you may have a relationship with somebody, but if you are consuming content that leads you down that path, then eventually you're not going to get enough stimulus to satisfy that need. And so that's what we've seen, is that then all of a sudden they get younger and younger. Your sexual proclivities get weirder and weirder.
Hmm.
And so eventually it leads down the path of desiring younger people. And if you keep feeding that monster, then eventually you're going to want to try to act on it physically. Some people claim that Well, if you're consuming something digitally, then you're not hurting anybody. Well,
Mm.
number one, you don't know that the digital content that's being produced, somebody had to produce that, and that's wrong. And then number two, if you keep going down that rabbit hole, then you're eventually going to commit a crime and harm somebody. And when you harm a child in that manner, that's a lifelong sentence. If I punched you in the arm and you got a bruise, it eventually will heal.
Yeah.
Okay. But if a child gets sexually harmed, that's something they have to deal with for the rest of their life. And a lot of them, they don't do well. Now some do. I mean, I've met some real people that I'm amazed and I look up to, but that's still not the path that we should be on, because it's an unnatural thing. The natural thing is for our kids to grow up and learning their social skills amongst each other. So when if you and I were kids, and if I took your toy from you and you pulled my hair, then I probably would quit taking your toy,
Hmm.
right? That's how we manage our social environments. And so that's natural. Okay. What's unnatural is somebody saying, "Hey, I'm going to give you this piece of chocolate because I know you like chocolate if you let me touch your leg." And
Hmm.
then that just gets elevated. It gets elevated. It's the child, they have no idea what they're dealing with. They know they like chocolate. They feel uncomfortable about the other part, but they don't know how to advocate for themselves. And
Yeah.
typically, if you have a child that is being sexually abused, what you find is there's behavior changes. They act out. Their grades suffer. There's a lot of things that I'm sure you've probably had guests on that have testified to. So, but I always return back to this is not natural, and that's what we need to be talking about.
Hmm. Hmm. So, with this problem, and I just want to say to everyone in the audience, thank you for continuing to listen because I know this isn't an easy topic to listen to, which is part of the problem, is that because it does make it's so unnatural that it makes so many of us uncomfortable to even fathom that this is not just a problem, but at the level, the size of the problem. So let's just talk about the size of the problem for a second. Um, Back in 2020, there was this child trafficking industry was considered to be estimated around 38 to 50 billion dollar industry. And today it is more than triple that. It's estimated to be at 150 billion. So in just 4 years, there has been a tripling of the industry. Can we talk about some of the things that have led to this massive growth of an industry that is so horrific in nature?
Well, there's probably two things that come to mind. First of all, if you get into the street gangs, I met with a undercover officer in Fort Worth about 3 years ago, and he was explaining to me how hard it was from a imagine, put your business hat on and you're a drug dealer. You have to procure a pound of fentanyl or heroin, crack, or cocaine. There's a danger. There's danger to that. You may have a source, but there's no honor among thieves, right? And so what they found was that they could acquire in their stable about four younger, not young children, but let's say teenagers. And with that, and you have a muscle person and you have what we call a madam. So you have a team of six people, and then you go from hotel to hotel. You have a clientele, and the risk value of that is a lot lower than you trying to buy and sell drugs. Okay, and the the
Why is
monetary.
that? Why specifically, why is it a lower risk?
Well, you go to your dealer and you've got to negotiate with the dealer. And these dealers, it's not like you're going to the bank and you're dealing with people that, hey, this guy's got $8,000 cash. He's going to buy my drugs. However, I could shoot him, take his money, and still have the drugs and sell them to somebody else. I mean, there's a lot of scenarios where it's a very dangerous thing to do. And so if you but if you manage sex slaves, then it's a lot. All you have to do is acquire the sex slaves, and there's a lot of kids out there that are runaways, or they're they're not getting the attention at home, and so they get caught up into this. And typically what happens is that these pimps, what they'll do is they'll seduce you with money and things, and eventually get you hooked on drugs, and then they start controlling you. You know, you move you out of the house, and they're making 200 to $250,000 per person a year. And this is tax free money. So for you're moving from moving drugs to $1 million gross operating income. And so there was a gentleman by the name of Jaco Bullion. He's a filmmaker from South Africa. He's out of the Dallas Fort Worth area. He actually did a movie called 8 Days that talks about this. And what they were doing was they were uh, having parties. They're going to sorority parties. So let's say, Nicole, you were going to a sorority party, and I would come to you as a promoter and say, look, Nicole, bring 10 of your hot friends, and if you once you get there, I'll pay you $300. So I'd tell 10 Nicoles to bring all these beautiful women, and then you'd have so many women, and bringing the guys is easy. They'll all just show up. And then all of a sudden, one or two of you might disappear. Okay. So they were doing it at a college and a high school level. He discovered that at LSU, they had discovered it happening there. And so this kind of tied in, these conversations that I've had tied into what the gangs were doing. And so these promoters were delivering people to the gangs, because oftentimes when you have college parties or in high school parties, you have younger kids show up.
Mm-hmm.
And so the other thing is that a predator can when they stalk somebody, they can pretty much size them up. They're very good at looking at a person and saying, okay, they don't have a father, or they don't have love in their home, or somebody that is susceptible to manipulation.
Yeah, vulnerable.
They are very vulnerable. So they're easy. And we as adults, we can do the same thing. I mean, you can look at somebody and say, yeah, they're probably having some issues at home. So once you identify the target, it's easy peasy. You go buy them a meal, take them shopping and buy clothes. You take them to a local concert. There's a number of things. And then what happens is it translates into, look, I'm running out of money. I'm going to have some money next week, but I need you to do this one thing. I need to go date with a friend of mine. And it just escalates from there. And then when you hit that resistance, and they start harming them. They smack them around. And so when you do that, what you're doing is, again, you're when you start physically abusing somebody, you're messing with that dopamine. So I can escalate the pain, and then I can escalate the air quotes, the love.
Mm-hmm.
And so now that's why people stay in abusive relationships, because they don't understand. Their brain is trained to having this escalated pain and love, and the love technically in their mind overshadows the pain, which is not true. Okay, it's hard to see it from inside that world, but when you're on the outside, it's easy to recognize. So these are the things that they're doing. So you've got the drug people are doing that, and then you got the cartels. The cartels, there's several things. They're making money off of labor, they're making money off of sex, and they're making money off of organs. Okay, we don't talk about the organ. What do you think's happening to these kids when they disappear? Right now, the Office of Refugee Resettlement (ORR), they are the arm of Homeland Security that's managing all the kids and all the NGOs. We're up to 320,000 kids missing. Where do you think these kids are? Some of them have completely disappeared. If they've used them up in sex trade, then they harvest their body parts for black market, organ cells. So we don't talk about this enough, but when you talk to people that are in this world, we do talk about it. And that's the biggest fear we have, is that ultimately these kids are being killed and their organs are harvested.
This, I mean, that's one of the most horrific parts of it all, is to not only have a child go through the torment and trauma of such a disgusting nature over and over and over again, but then to then just be disposed of, killed, only to use their organs for. Can you just, before we move on, share with the audience why are their organs being sold on the black market? Like, what is the value, the dollar value?
I don't have any numbers on the dollar value. I do know that when you, it's like anything. If you need a new heart or a new set of lungs, you have some challenges within the system that we have. And we have a really, you know, and I'm not an expert on this, meaning I feel like we have a pretty good system for people that donate organs. But what I do understand is that if you are of means and you have a child or a spouse or a friend that needs a lung or a kidney, that time is not your friend,
Hmm.
number one. And you can't you can buy a wing of a hospital, but they're not going to put you at the front of the line. So
Hmm.
you go to the black market and it's a lot easier. All you need is a match, a physical match. And I would imagine that the cartels are probably cataloging the data. So if somebody is very specific, you could find a match a lot quicker than you could through the waiting list system that we currently have.
I mean, just because this is a spiritual podcast, spiritually, whoever is receiving that organ is receiving the trauma, the like it's interesting because we've heard of instances where someone, I mean, I had a guy on here who worked in a hospital and he would be a nurse for those who had received like organ transplants. And he remembers someone who all of a sudden after his organ transplant just had a massive craving for chicken nuggets, like just couldn't stop like wanting that, and it was based that he never really even liked them before, but apparently like the donor had just had this affinity, like that was his thing. You take on certain traits, or even because trauma is so ingrained in us cellularly. And when we think about the kind of organs that are being donated, like a heart, just the nature of what a heart means spiritually, or even the kidneys. The kidneys, for me, I know store a ton of fear. Like even in acupuncture, if you look down in Chinese medicine, the kidneys are about fear. The liver is about anger. You get some child who has been tormented and gone under such extreme duress and trauma, that energy is stored in the organs, which is then being passed on to other people. I mean, it's just a horrible thing just to, overall, just to think about, to even house that kind of energy in your body. But I want to kind of talk about, because I think this is extremely important, and this isn't, I really try not to get too political on this show, but the border security of this country has been completely demolished in the last with the last administration. And that's not to say that other administrations haven't been lax either. But it was severely demolished. And we're now in a part where we're seeing that that is being rectified, which for me is one of the biggest blessings that this country could really use right now. It's not just the safety of the children, which I think is first and foremost, but the safety of anyone who lives here. As someone who lives in Denver, Colorado, I have personally seen, the effects of allowing um, illegal criminals like Venezuelan gangs into the city and what that has done. We have seen a lot of increase of crime and uh, just what is kind of going on, and that you've seen these buildings housing women who are being used for sex trafficking. So because you've just talked about like the cartel and the drugs, and what do you believe the impact will be now that the current administration has declared cartels as terrorists?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see. I'm kind of excited about it, but there are some things that um, I'm kind of a wait and see. Number one, when you declare somebody a terrorist, the government is supposed to take all your money, all your assets.
Yeah.
They can do that. And then you're persona non grata. So if they see you, they can arrest you immediately. Okay. They don't need a warrant or anything like that. So I'm excited about it. I know that the people that I've spoken to in law enforcement, they're excited about it. And I think this is the right thing to, the right move. If you look in Dr. John Spears in 2000, and he was talking in 2000, and Dr. John Spears he's an expert on fentanyl. He is an ER emergency specialist out of Houston. He trains a lot of people on the border, and over 120,000 people died in 2022. And it was so bad. When I spoke to him, it was 116,000, but it was probably the first quarter of the following year, and they were still doing autopsies. They had so many bodies that they were doing autopsies. And we have these moments where we complain about certain things, but nobody talks about the fentanyl problem that we have and the drug problem. And with fentanyl, what people don't realize is it's not only coming into our country, it's going to there's a fentanyl problem in Canada, and it's going all the way from our southern border all the way across the border. So we need to stop the madness that's happening on the border. Okay. And there's a lot of things that you don't see, of obviously the obvious things, but the amount of trash and the amount of stuff that's coming across. There's terrorists that are known terrorists coming across the border. There's known, who knows what other um, types of products that are coming across the border that eventually are going to come to fruition. And this stuff needs to be stopped. And what's interesting is our policymakers, they don't live, I always say, hey, you got to see what life is like from the cheap seats. Okay. We live in the cheap seats in my world. And so whenever policymakers make their decisions, oftentimes they don't look at life from the cheap seats, like the actual people that are doing the work. Nobody asks the Border Patrol and BORTAC, how can you make the system better? They always talk about all the things that they're doing, but the bottom line is that we need to manage our borders, which I think we will be much better. This war on the cartel is going to be very interesting, and the real question is how's the cartels going to react to it? And they could react. They're talking some stuff now,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't want to. I will tell you this: there are guys in the U.S. military. I'm talking about retired Tier 1 special operations guys. They are ready to gear up. They'll do it for free. They will show up. And these are guys that know how to wreak havoc. They're happy to do it. And so the cartel, I feel like they need to reevaluate their business model and take America off of their client list. So we'll see what happens. I'm very hopeful. I think that this administration is going to do something about it.
Yeah, because I mean, if the US is the largest consumer of child sex trafficking, it would make sense to want to be inside that country to sell your product.
Indeed, indeed. And what happens is when you start putting a squeeze on the product line, it increases, the demand would go up and the prices would go up. So I don't have a crystal ball, but what I do know is this is going to be very interesting to see how committed we are. And I tell you what your listeners need to look at is anybody that is defending um, the bad actions, and they're defending it by saying, "Hey, we shouldn't be doing this. We don't need to build a wall. We don't need to put boots on the ground." Right now they're complaining about the military. They're using the guise of our military is not supposed to be operating on our soil. That's part of our Constitution. But what they're doing is they're putting the military down there to keep the bad guys out.
Mm-hmm.
And so, is that a slippery slope? I'm not a military legal expert, but I do feel like having the military down there to engage with the bad guys is a smart move.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I mean, what's also been interesting is, for instance, one of the executive orders was put in place to, stop funding the illegal migrants that have come into the country, that were welcomed into the country, given cell phones and healthcare and education paid for, while, the US paying like tax paying US citizen, or resident, was not realizing where their money's going to. And just even have realizing that there was $59 billion paid to luxury hotels to house illegal immigrants. And it doesn't make any sense. Like, what the purpose of a luxury hotel is to provide a luxury service to those who want to pay that kind of money. But you have now hotels and corporations that are accepting this money because there's no work on their end. There's no marketing that needs to be done. There's no whatever. And it's just, and I don't understand why it's so difficult. And this is where we have to really take a step back. This is not about who you voted for. This is not about what political party you align with. Because at the end of the day, I do believe that the gross misuse of power is on both sides. It's requiring people, there's only a select few, and I do believe there's a select few on both sides that are realizing that they can't really be with a specific side. It's about really just standing up for what's right, what has to be done. It's new leadership that is really what's being called for. And we're starting to see kind of that outside leadership stepping in because it's so entrenched in the political system to just use information to sway you this way or that way so that you can hold on to whatever beliefs that you want to believe that you're on the right side. And I just don't feel like there's a right side anymore. It's about really just kind of looking at things very logically. This is where we have to take a lot of our personal emotions, kind of set them aside for a moment and just really look at what's going on and why we're being called to look at this and not that. Why, when something that seems so obvious, such as safety, is being muddled with having more emotional attachment to criminals. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And so, with this particular problem, the one thing I've always felt is that, children is not a bipartisan issue. Like, this is an issue that everyone, I believe, in the heart of hearts, can get behind. And I do believe that at the end of the day, doesn't matter what side of the party line you're on, at the end of the day, most of us are around the middle, and we're all like wanting very similar things. We just maybe have different ideas of how we're supposed to go about it. So, with that being said, if we don't start taking this more seriously, and by more seriously, I mean having these open conversations, bringing more awareness to it, being a participant in the solution, not the problem. Uh, what happens if we're not not forcing ourselves to be a little uncomfortable for the sake of a conversation or to listen to something that maybe makes us feel queasy in our stomach? Like, what is the repercussions of that given where we are right now?
I think what I would encourage them to do is, first of all, one of the things that I did 10 years ago is I quit watching the news. And because all I did was I was mad all the time
Mm-hmm.
and about stuff I couldn't do anything. And so then I started asking questions. And I'm not asking questions. Some people ask questions just to be a jerk. I ask questions, I call them litmus tests. Um, Everything has a litmus test, and no litmus test is um, sure, sure proof. But over time, as you ask these questions, like for example, let's just take why is it that One of the things that really upsets me about our political system is why is it that I have to um, why does corporations get to donate in the political system? Okay, if I were to donate to just a local person, let's say the local mayor, my money, I'm competing with big corporations, so my donation really doesn't matter. And I don't even think that we should even be allowed to donate to a party. I think if it should only the only donation should be a max cap, because if you ask the question, who is this political person that I'm supporting? Who are they indentured to? And that's kind of the first start. And they may do good. In the CIA, they always say use the 80-20 rule. If you're going to spin a lie, you always have 80% truth, 20% lie. So you could have a political person that is executing a lot of things that you like, but then they do that one thing that you don't like, that they said they would never do. And then the next question is, well, what is our system? What instrument allows them to do that? Well, if you inspect how a bill is performed, bills typically have things that do not pertain to the title of the bill. So if you had, say, like the Save the Child Act, well, somebody wants to build a bridge, they want to do this. So the system that if we're over here arguing over things that are, volatile, like we'll be arguing about things like abortion or race or religion. We're arguing over this stuff. In the meantime, they're passing laws and they're getting their stuff. They're self-enriching, but we're not asking the litmus test. Instead, we're looking at this politician's bad because I don't like him because he says stuff on Twitter that makes me angry. Well, okay. Um, and there's a phrase that people say all the time, and I get really angry with them. And they'll say before they'll preface a conversation, well, I don't agree with this person most of what he says. Well, I don't agree with anybody 100%. So why do you even have to say that?
Yeah,
But we
yeah.
say that because we're instead of saying we think we're aligning with a person that people don't like. Instead of saying this person's actions, they're actually doing something good, and I'm aligning with the good. Okay, I like what they're doing, I like what they're trying to achieve, and I support that. Start looking at the action and not necessarily a person, because what we're seeing is a lot of these political figures. First thing I look at is what's their net worth. Okay, there's a lot of them that their net worth's greater than Warren. If I gave Warren Buffett all my money, they could never grow my personal finances the way that some of these politicians have. So these are the type of questions that we need to ask. And what they're doing is they're trying to throw things out there. So we're not asking these questions. We're not asking why do we have a political system that doesn't support the common person? Nicole, you and I, we could spend hours having conversations about certain topics and agree. You know what? I have a different belief than you do,
Mhm.
but we could also agree. Hey, it's okay that you have a different opinion. I may vehemently oppose your opinion, but for me, there should be love amongst men and women that says they should be allowed to have their position, and they should be not be afraid to talk about their position, and they should do it in a manner that is um, not just to be spiteful. Because right now we're all standing in front of each other, screaming each other our position, and what we're not doing is we're not fixing society. We're not working on the kids, which I think we need to do. And Nicole, it's bigger than that though. We not only do we need to save the kids, but we need to change our culture, because every single person, if you take every pedophile and every trafficker, they were once little babies. Okay. So how did they get from being a child to being a really evil person? And we've got to change that trajectory going forward.
Yeah, we've got to really look at the root causes of what gets someone to that point. Um, it's it's a monster of a problem to attack, which is all the more reason why we need to be so on it right now. We have to be really, really aware and attentive, but also proactive. We have to be active participants in the solution right now because it is a monster of a problem. And unfortunately, we are where we are, but there are groups that are working to provide solutions like Veterans for Child Rescue. Can you share some of the you know, here's one of the things that I think also is a concern, because it's certainly a concern of mine whenever I'm asked to donate money to any kind of charity or anything that might be trying to do good in the world, which currently we are seeing, the absolute just gross misuse of money for under the guise of US aid, right? We're seeing how like money that was supposed to go towards helping real issues is not really going towards helping real issues. And so we let's bring that down to a small scale of, okay, I want to donate to say a cause like this. All right. Can you explain to my audience why they can maybe even trust that their money is actually going to the cause that they're wanting to support versus being redirected in another way?
Okay. So we are a small organization.
Hmm.
Number one, we're not very big, and we're very careful about the people that we have in on the core team. We are managed by for example, I have an accounting firm that specifically deals with nonprofits. So they make sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's. We get audited every year. I have 22 states I'm required to be audited by. And it's so what's interesting is I hear about larger organizations getting away with stuff. And I'm like, oh my, how do they do it? I'm over here struggling, you know, the beginning of the year, I've got to pay all my fees for every state, and I got to fill out questionnaires. And I actually use a third party company that helps me do all this stuff. And so we do that. And so what we do, there's several things that we do. Number one is we are a media company. So we do what you're doing. We have a radio show, we have a TV show. Our radio show is called Defending Our Children. Our TV show and our radio show is on Brushwood Media Network. Our TV show is on The Grio, which is a streaming service. We have Contraland, which is a movie that we made, a documentary in 2020. It's a Hollywood level documentary, and we gave it away. We didn't make any money off of it. And it was just a nightmare. We could have a whole other show about the nightmare of trying to monetize it. And then we do law enforcement training, and we run counter trafficking operations with law enforcement at state and federal level. And so one of our biggest barriers is finding DAs that will prosecute. And in Texas, the Texas Attorney General, one of the attorneys there, I had a conversation with him in front of a large group of law enforcement. He talked about how difficult it is to prosecute trafficking crimes. It's easier to do sex crimes, and that's just the way the laws are. And I suspect in other states they are the same. So because the trafficking prosecutions are low throughout the states. So we focus on that. We do not focus on, I mean, we support legislation, but there's a lot of legislation that's out there that's not being enforced. So we try to work with law enforcement to execute and get arrests. And it's very difficult. Okay. And not only is it difficult, it's very bureaucratic. And we've executed, what we do is we have what they call the 3X rule. If we think you're a bad person and we're interacting with you, we have enough evidence to arrest you 3 times over. And some of these people we don't see face to face. It's all, online. But then law enforcement has to go find this person. And once they arrest them, then they have to go through the process. And it may take a year before we go from an arrest to conviction. So in my mind, that's a problem in the system that needs to be addressed. But these are the things that we focus on. We share what we can. And we also do some investigations that we don't share. There's some long-term surveillance type investigative work that we do. We don't talk about. And these are big fish that we're going after. And we work with various agencies, and I can't reveal any of that. But with this new administration, that aspect of it, we're hoping is going to be enhanced for us. Because when you're over here saying, hey, we think something's going on here and this is what we think, law enforcement, they have so many piles that they have to deal with in their work. They always go to the easiest. We tend to be, as humans, hey, what's the easiest task I can do? This is more complex. So that, yes, we provide them with intel and information, but they tend to work the things that are a lot easier. So we are hoping for a shift into anti-trafficking because it's such a, it's a volatile subject. It's recognizable that this is something nobody should have to go through. And imagine if you can deal with this with the kids and save the children at a young age, then their lives will be better. But if they go through this process for a long time, the longer you're in it, the harder it is to get out of it, emotionally and mentally. So, yeah, Veterans for Child, we can go to v4cr.org and check out what we do. We have a lot of training information. We have a lot of recommendations of what you can do. And listen, if it's not V4CR, there are other organizations, and figure out what you can do for them. It doesn't, if you don't have the money to donate to them, that's fine. Now, you're not going to be a door kicker. Everybody wants to be a door kicker. But I'm telling you, 1% of what we do is kicking doors. There's 99% of work of getting to that door. And you may be somebody who can just read data. You may be somebody that can help with paperwork, or you may be somebody that can help raise money, get sponsors. There's a lot of things that you can do. So don't automatically assume if somebody says, hey, that's great, but I need you to do this. I need somebody to clean the toilets and sweep the floors. It sounds silly. Sometimes we go on operations, we need somebody that can cook. I know that sounds interesting, but when we are in operation, we're typically, we work 16-hour days, and I do a lot of the cooking, or I bring somebody that can cook meals for, 10, 15 people. And sometimes we even feed law enforcement. And we've been lucky to have cooking facilities where we operate at. And, but that's, it just seems odd that I have to ask somebody, hey, can you come and cook for us? They look at me like, what? I'm like, yeah, we got to feed everybody because we're working. We don't have time, and there's some team members that we watch over some of our team members that are the digital warriors. And a lot of times these are survivors, and they'll go 12 hours without drinking anything. So we have to, hey, have you had something to drink? Have you taken a break? Sometimes we'll have a counselor on site to deal with, because if you have somebody that has been, something could trigger them and they need to be talked off the ledge. And, Craig and I, especially Craig, we are good at breaking stuff. I may not be the best person, if you need a shoulder to cry on, I will be there. But, there's better shoulders out there to cry on. Right. I will do whatever it takes, but, so we bring people to do that. And what do we spend our money on? We spend our money on airfare, lodging, vehicles. That's where we spend our money, and food. Okay. And gear. Sometimes we got a lot of camera gear. We've got a lot of surveillance gear. We do wear body armor. So we have a lot of protection gear. Our body armor and some of that stuff we have sponsors for. So, but that's the kind of things that we spend our money on. And I will tell you this, if you ever, you can always go online. We have our 990s online, so you can read where we spend our money. If you don't understand something, I'm happy to try to explain things to you, because some people don't understand financials.
Yeah. It's for anyone who would like to, at the very minimum, like donate. I'm going to leave a link in the description below for you guys to do that. And it's, the last time I think when you were on, there were some issues with all of that, but it's super easy now. They've been able to really streamline that so that the money goes directly to Veterans for Child Rescue. And I think one of the things that you guys are doing that is important to understand why this can be actually a bigger help to the problem than maybe people realize is you said one of the things that you do is your training. Now you guys have 100% conviction rate, which is huge, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
Would you say that conviction rate is largely due to the level of training that you are under?
Yes. And so Craig Sawyer, our founder,
Mm-hmm.
he was Marines. Then he went to the SEAL Team 6. He was a SEAL Team 6 sniper. And after that, he became a federal investigator and then a federal air marshal. He was what they call with the original 33. Before 9/11 happened, there were 33 in the air marshal program. That's it. So he was a member of the core team, and then it blew up, and they had hundreds of people after 9/11 because so he is a in law enforcement he's learned how to build a case, write a report, how to gather evidence. So what we do is we meet with the district attorney where we're operating, and we kind of talk about the rules of engagement. And as a nonprofit, there are things that we can do that law enforcement can't do. There's some lines we can, and it's legal, um, uh, but there are lines that we can color outside. Now, what they do when we run an operation is they make sure that we stay with it because we have our own set of boundaries. They keep us inside of those boundaries. And so, because of his training, he puts together a plan that he presents to them based upon the parameters that they share because we operate in different states. So, in Texas, it may be one way, in Colorado, it may be another way.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, Craig's going to be in Colorado next week to meet with some folks. No, he's there this week. I'm sorry, he's there right now because he's going to Idaho next week. So he's there meeting with some guys to get some operations in Colorado. So we're super excited about Colorado. Um,
I'm
and
super excited that you guys are working in Colorado. We definitely need you.
yeah, and what's interesting too is that we typically we don't go to the major cities. So the major
No,
cities
yes.
they for they don't. Now I can only speculate. The pushback I've ever received is, "Hey, we have our own anti-trafficking crime unit, and we're really good at it." Um, or thank you kindly, but we don't need you, sort of thing. And so, um, in Harris County, which is
Which
Houston,
seems strange because this is a very big problem. Like you need all the help you can get. So to turn down free help, because that's what you guys are funded for, is to go in
mm-hmm.
there and train law enforcement for free.
It is. And what we operate with what we call a tier one special operations personnel. So these are guys that were in Delta Force, Navy SEALs, that sort of thing. And they're combat tested.
Hmm.
And what people don't understand is that we're not about chaos. We're about managing chaos. So if they provide support to law enforcement, and there are places that we go are very dangerous.
Hmm.
And so just the fact that you have these guys geared up in these areas, anybody that wants to mess with law enforcement, they look at these guys and say, "Yeah, not today. We're going to back it off." So we really provide a blanket of security in some of the places that we operate, and it's pretty cool to see. We've done a lot of work down on the border, and it's the Wild West down there. And I've been in the middle of some pretty sketchy places, but I felt very comfortable, very safe. I had somebody that was retired from a police department in a major city ask me, "Well, aren't you scared?" I'm like, "Are you kidding me? I feel absolutely fine. I got four guys here that could protect the whole team here, and they've done it time and time again. So no, I'm not scared.
Hmm.
You know." And I will say this: I do pray a lot when I'm there, but I'm not praying out of fear. I'm just praying out of what I look for logical instructions on how to execute the best plan that we
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
I want to do it right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Exactly.
I
More
want
from
people
a
to be
place of,
safe. I want to do it right.
yeah, more from a place of gratitude, like,
Exactly.
yeah. Before I ask you another question, I just want this to be very clear to my audience so they understand. You guys, there are so many different ways that you can help. One of them is you can just simply donate. Okay. You can
Yes.
start giving money to an organization that is really working to do very big change that is so desperately needed right now. And on my word, for anyone who may like trust my word, if it means anything, uh, I've had multiple conversations with Forrest. Plus, I've had multiple conversations with my team that is working directly with you. So with that, with United to One. So,
Mm-hmm.
and they're very just good souls that are just um, really wanting to affect change uh, that we all understand is so necessary with the children. But there are other ways. So, for instance, wherever you are living, especially if you're not in one of the really big cities, because the big cities tend to give you guys pushback, but if you can reach out to your district attorney and set up a meeting for Veterans for Child Rescue. That could be very helpful to you guys, right? Like if you could meet certain district attorneys, have a conversation, get the door open where you can get in and talk to them and say, "Hey, some of my constituents want me to have a conversation with you." That could be very helpful as well. So people talk about how people can reach out to their district attorneys to maybe open doors for you guys.
Yeah, we that's kind of the choke point of what we do. And if you take a small town, I always say in this general vicinity, 40, 50,000 people. So you may be in a town of 10,000 people, but you may have 50,000 people, in the surrounding areas. Sometimes there's a district attorney that may cover multiple counties. And just pick up the phone, give them a call, go by and see them. A lot of these guys, they're happy to visit with their constituents and say, look, there's this outfit called Veterans for Child Rescue, and they would love to come to your town, work with law enforcement, and catch some bad guys. And I hear they're pretty good at it. And if you get some victories, imagine if you get these type of victories, because this is the type of crimes that people aren't aware of. So imagine from a PR perspective, say, hey, we went hunting and look what we caught. Okay. We didn't realize this was there. It wasn't apparent. And we caught these bad guys and we are protecting your children. And we're doing our job. What you're basically is you're giving them the ability to do something. What you're doing is you're enhancing your culture. Okay. We spend often too many times talking about bad things, but victories in our lives are good things. And so when you get these victories in your area, that's the thing. If you connected us to them, then you really made it happen. You made it happen by talking to the district attorney and saying, look, I think this is a good thing, and making the introduction. At that point, it's up to us to convince them to let us to come operate.
Yeah. And not only that, what you're doing essentially is you are bringing in a very high level training to the law enforcement in your area to be more prepared and better equipped to keep your you safe and your neighbors safe, and to potentially save children in that area who you, unbeknownst to you, are, in definite big harm's way.
What's interesting too is when we engage with law enforcement, they have some intel, and they love working. They love meeting the team. They love working with these guys, and we learn from them. They learn from us, that sort of thing. So there's some camaraderie, and if you're proud of what you're doing, you're going to do a better job. And that's one of the aspects of what we do is we want law enforcement. We want them to be proud of the work that they do, because oftentimes they're unsung heroes. They get blamed for the small minority activity that happens throughout the country. I tell you what, man, if you do a ride along for a day, it would change your perspective on what law enforcement has to deal with. It's crazy what they have to deal with. So this is one thing that if your listeners can get us connected to a district attorney, then that I would be so grateful, and would be even, might even have them, do a shout out on the radio show, whatever they want. If they want to be a silent partner, that's fine. But I certainly would, I would give them some kudos.
Yeah. I think it's a wonderful way for anyone to get involved. Like at the end of the day, we are the boots on the ground. We are the ones that are going to basically make the change. You can't wait for, all of the leaders to just decide one day that they're going to, oh, like kumbaya, let's all like make it work. Like it's really going to start from us pushing harder for what it is that we want. And it's your voice that matters. And you have to start speaking not just louder, but more consistently and persistently. So the more persistent and consistently you speak up to your elected officials, okay, and let them know what you want, and why you want it, the more they're going to have to start listening. And you'll also get an idea of like, did this person I vote for actually work for something that I believe is very important, right now, an important issue. So I think that, especially if you're in the districts where they're not necessarily the big cities, because that is where they're getting the pushback. So if you are in the surrounding areas, you actually could do some really big work here and help out. And, we all want to be part of the change. And so this is just one way that you could be part of that change, and who knows where it could lead. And also, for any of you who are maybe wanting to get more involved in some way of spreading this word, reach out to me, Nicole at NicoleFrolick.com, and I will hook you up. I will start getting you in front of the people that you could literally start making this part of your life mission, or maybe this is something you just want to do on the side. You got a few hours extra a week that you can, donate, and you can start helping spread awareness, getting more people in on this. I will definitely connect you to the right people. So, I think there's a multitude of different ways here. It's not just about donating your money, but that definitely helps because it's going to great use. I mean, 100% conviction rate. You have to get the the pedophiles off the street. Like you have to get these criminals off the street because that's what they are. And so because I think when you were on last time, we said that for every pedophile, there's about 100 children that are saved when you
It's
take.
somewhere between 70 and 100,
Okay.
depending on what stage they are in their lives. And this is a number of victims, not the number of occurrences.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do speak to the district attorney, ask him some really inquisitive, ask questions. And what I mean is, don't go at him like you need to do this. Just say, hey, um, tell me what, tell me how y'all deal with trafficking here. How bad is it? Just get some general questions. Say, hey, what if I could introduce you to somebody that could really help you put some bad guys in jail and it won't cost you anything? All it'll take is 30-minute phone call. It'll be a 30-minute Zoom call. I know these guys are not they're awesome. Check them out. And if you present it to that way, because nobody likes to be told how to do their job. And I think some people, they don't understand how to approach a district attorney. So if you ask a couple of questions and if you're generally interested in what they have to say, and you never know, they may tell you something that you'd be like, wow, we may learn something together that we didn't know. And but then you introduce us into say, look, I'm just asking you as a voter, could you please just I can arrange it, do this phone call with them. It will only cost you a half an hour. And I think you'll be pleased with what they have to offer.
That's one. I'm so glad that you shared that because I think that might be the biggest hurdle that people would have is like, okay, I want to call, I just don't know what to say. Like how do I? Because it's not just about what do I say, it's about how do I say it so that I actually have them open to like being receptive to the idea that they're willing to take that call, right? And so thank you for sharing that with my audience. And at the end of the day, this is God's work, really. Like this is God's work.
Indeed.
And to be part of that is a big deal. And I think so many of us feel helpless when the amount of problems that we are facing can seem that insurmountable, but it takes is just a chipping away. And as long as there's a lot of us chipping away, this thing can get solved. So, Forrest, thank you so much for coming on the show. To everyone who's out there, let them know again the TV show, the radio show, the documentary, and how they can get more information about what you guys are doing.
Okay. You can first find us at Veterans for Child Rescue's website. It's v4cr.org. Our radio show is on the Brushwood Media Network, but you can watch it on TuneIn, Apple, Spotify. You just search Brushwood Media Network or Defending Our Children. You can see our TV show on a network called The Grio. It's GRIO, on typically on Roku or on Apple. You can download the app. We've got Contraland is the documentary we make. You can watch it for free at contralandmovie.com. And I highly recommend, at the very least, right now, when you get finished listening to the show, go to YouTube and just watch the trailer. I think if you watch the trailer, you will be taken aback, like, wow, I have to watch this movie. Even my friends, I've had friends that told me that they would watch the movie and they didn't. So when I show them the trailer, they're like, wow, I didn't realize. So watch the trailer. You can see it on YouTube. Just do a search for Contraland trailer and you'll find it.
Wonderful. And for all of you, again, if you're interested in donating, financially helping Veterans for Child Rescue, I'm leaving a link down below for you to do that. And it's super easy now. And it's literally like 1, 2, 3, click and you're done. So that's also another way that you can help. So thank you again, Forrest, for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time and most of all, the work that you guys are doing. I'm excited that Craig's here in Colorado right now. Very, very excited about that. And to everyone out there, you absolutely can be part of the change. This is a big change. And like many of you may have listened, I do believe that we are entering into a time where there are going to be many trials, and people are going to be having to answer to many crimes. So be part of that change and the wave of bringing, justice to not just the children, but to the communities that want to be safe. So thank you so much, Forrest, for being here, and to everyone else. I love you guys. I'll be back here next week with you. Thanks again for joining me for another show on the Enlighten Up podcast. I love you guys so much for all of your continued support. So remember to raise your vibe, find your tribe, and be open to the infinite possibilities held in the mysteries that surround us all. Thanks again for sharing the show with your family and friends. And if you're new to the show and you need to find out more information about me, please head on over to my website, NicoleFrolick.com, where you can join my newsletter. And please follow me on Instagram, Telegram, and YouTube. Keep your light bright, and I'll see you next week.